You're listening to the Fierce Valley Podcast, episode 148, the biggest scammers in the weight loss industry. Let's do it. Hey fatties, welcome to this episode. So glad you're here. I think this episode is probably the one that has taken me the longest ever to research. I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated with how long it took me. I don't know, many hours. I was like, oh, this would be a nice quick thing to do. Maybe not. I was going to record the podcast early today. It is now 10 to 5. I was like, well, I'll just quickly get it out at like 10 a.m. No, had more research to do. There are a number of links for this that you'll find in the show notes for everything that I'm talking about, which is fiercefatty.com/148. If you want to donate to the podcast, because there's no adverts. There's never been adverts. Oh my goodness. And if you like it without adverts, then feel free to go over to PayPal. And it's just Fierce Fatty if you want to send a donation over. And if you don't, that's fine as well. There's actually a 4-part documentary series, which was the thing that inspired me. And the documentary series, I'd watched it years ago and I was just reminded of it. It's called The Men Who Made Us Thin. It's a British production, and it goes through, it's half there being fat positive, but not really. There's a lot of mentions of the O words, and the presenter is kind of focusing on how it's bad to say that everyone is fat, because people like him who are only ever so slightly fat aren't unhealthy. But it's kind of like the way that he talks about fat people is like, well, of course they deserve all this barbaric treatment, but it's the ones that are like me. That's the kind of gist of this person, the reporter. So I mean, and then there's lots of good kind of like, you're like, yes, you're talking about this, amazing. And then they go and talk about like McDonald's. I was like, for fuck's sake, don't do it. So watch that with caution. There's links to watch all 4 parts. It's on Daily Motion, so you can watch them for free if you are so inspired. It's 4 hours. And yeah, but from that and from other research, I was like, do you know what, there's some really key kind of the biggest scammers, and I thought it'd be nice LOL, enraging, to put the list together of maybe who's benefited the most from diet culture, weight loss, all that type of stuff. And I think, it would be great. This is all in recent-ish history in the last 200 years. I would love, if I have more time in another episode, to do maybe older history. Because here we're going back to, the earliest is, we're talking about 1830. But really the biggest scammers in the weight loss industry is white colonizers, right? And I'm wondering if there are more kind of solid, this person was the one that did this in regards to and I know, well, we've spoken about it before on the show in regards to perpetuating the ideas of thinness and whiteness and fatness and blackness being linked, and to be attractive you need to be thin, aka white. And I think that's basically the biggest scammers in the weight loss industry is whiteness. Basically whiteness, right? But this is more kind of recent history, and Oh, well, surprise, surprise, everyone on this list is white. Yeah. But I think all of this that we're talking about today, we cannot get away from the systems that are at play here of anti-black racism, of ableism, of colonization, sexism, etc., 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 right? And the big thing being anti-black racism, that mean that this type of stuff perpetuates and has for hundreds of years now. But anyway, saying all that, if we keep that in mind, I wanted to actually pick out individuals versus systems of oppression, right? And so the people who have really benefited the most from this bullshit. And we're going to start off with, we've spoken about him before, Adolphe Quetelet in 1832. So he was the fella who invented the BMI, although it wasn't called the BMI at that time. So he was an astronomer, mathematician, statistician, and sociologist who created the idea of the ideal man. So he used the words l'homme moyen, which is actually average man, but when he was talking about average, he didn't mean average as in mediocre, he was more like average as in the best, right? And so he was prolific in doing a lot of research and was really interested in finding out about what the average man was. And he said, this is a quote from Quetelet, if the average man were completely determined, we might consider him as a type of perfection, and everything differing from his proportion or condition would constitute deformity or disease or monstrosity. So he's saying that those who are outside what is the ideal are diseased and monstrous or deformed. So he created the Quetelet's index, later renamed the BMI, by measuring white European men, their height and their weight, and coming up with an arbitrary equation to calculate averages. And the reason people like the BMI is because it's so simple, right? And that's the reason why it's so fucked up. Aside from the fact that it's bullshit, is it's the idea that it's very simple. It's very simple, and it's very easy to say people who fall outside of this are not ideal. And lo and behold, he did all of his studies on white men, European white men, and his work actually contributed to the creation of phrenology, which is a racist pseudoscience which uses the human skull to falsely determine cultural and intellectual superiority of white people. So you might see those, if you're not familiar with that, see those skulls, and it'll have little, let's measure the length between the nose and the eyes, and let's look at this bony part here, and it turns out that white people are superior. Oh, surprise, surprise. So his work really influenced a lot of eugenicist pseudoscience, because it's the measuring of humans, right? And also grouping humans and races, and so he benefited greatly because he was seen as an expert in the field. He had many different positions, and basically that he did say we don't want to use the Quetelet index to measure health. We want to measure the ideal person. And he talked about beauty and things like that as well. Right, so that was 1832. So let's fast forward to 1972. So do you remember the name Ancel Keys? So Ancel Keys, we've spoken about him on the podcast before. He was famous for running the Minnesota starvation experiment. If you want to go into that and want to learn more about the Minnesota starvation experiment, go to episode, I think it's 92. It's called the psychology of hunger. And in this study, he had a bunch of conscientious objectors. This was in 1944. He had a bunch of them, and there was a lot of kind of shame around being and not being at war, and he wanted to see how to refeed people in war-torn places. And so he did this study where he, quote, starved. It was starvation experiment, and then refed the volunteers. Guess how many calories they were on? 1,800 calories a day. In the study, which is the reason why I'm pointing that out is because that would be seen as a generous diet, calorie amount on a diet, right? But the men in this study had terrible side effects. Even when they had a control time where they were fed, I think 3,600 calories for a few months, and then they did this for I think 3 to 6 months. And go to the episode; it tells you more. Episode 92, 3 to 6 months where they were doing the 1,800 calories, and then they had another 3 months where they were refeeding back at the 3,000 plus calories. And during the time that they were in the starvation period, they basically had a really tough time. And then it didn't end when it was the refeeding time. The effects were really, really long term on these men. One man chopped off 3 of his fingers. One man had to be hospitalized well after the study because he couldn't stop eating, because he had developed BED, binge eating disorder. So later on, and so he had that knowledge from 1944. 5 years later, he published a study. He used that information earlier to help with the war efforts, to help people when they were coming across people who were starved. So that was 1944, and then in 1972, he did a study where he popularized the use of Quetelet's original index and renamed it the Body Mass Index. Again, made the same mistake as Quetelet, using data from predominantly white men. And that study that he did, the National Institute of Health then popularized the use of the body mass index as a way of establishing health. So what really gets on my flaps about Ancel Keys is he saw the damage that starving people did to them, and starving them on still what would be now considered a sensible diet, right? And he saw what happened, and instead of championing work in regards to not prescribing diets, he went on to create the Mediterranean diet. So it's like he was so close. His work was, obviously there was good work there, and he did very, very helpful things for many people, but it's like he could have, it feels like he didn't put 2 and 2 together there, and he just couldn't get out of that fatness was something bad. And so him and his wife released a number of diet books later in their years. So that was Ancel Keys. Okay, so I don't know why I went straight to Ancel Keys in 1974, because actually we're going to go to 1940. So let's go back in time. So Louis Dublin was the chief statistician for Metropolitan Life Insurance Company, and that was the biggest insurance company in the world at the time. So this fella, Louis Dublin, arbitrarily drew up a chart of the weight, height of people who bought his insurance, MetLife Insurance, and included frame size. small, medium, large. What the fuck frame size means? What? Frame size? Like human beings are tense? Like, so he got people's heights, weights, and frame size, and concluded that the people of a certain size lived longer, but using only data from people who were 25 to 30 years old. And data which was self-reported, data from people who were rich enough to afford life insurance. There's going to be a lot of white people. See the theme here? A perfect white body. And so this, the chart that he drew up was not based on evidence or any scientific study. He made the weight which someone is considered too heavy much lower than what it was originally. So previously, just a small percentage of the population, it'd be like, you know how, the doctor might say, oh, your kid's in the 95th percentile for height. And you know that most other kids are shorter than your kid, right? And so that before, the people who were the highest weight people, you'd be like, those were the people who had the biggest bodies, right? Or were considered too big. So he changed it so that suddenly, overnight, and you'll see this has happened a lot of times before. I say a lot of times. Two more times this has happened, big overnight changes to BMI and what is classed as too big. Suddenly, going from a small percentage of people who is considered too fat to half of the American population was reclassified as too fat. So with the stroke of a pen, he was able to change people's premiums and charge people's premiums, increase the premiums due to their body size, and establish that their bodies were wrong. I mean, I gotta give it to them, for capitalists, you did it, right? And his ideas were adopted by the medical establishment and then by the US government. And Louis Dublin's ideas contributed toward the creation of the modern diet industry and has had a massive cultural impact. Him doing this has led doctors to telling people in droves to lose weight. And people at the time in the 40s and 50s rushed to pharmacies in panic. A huge market of consumers were convinced that they were too fat. And corporate America realized to sell the impossible dream of thinness, they could make unimaginable profits. So corporate America was like licking its lips. And I guess Louis Dublin was from corporate America, right? One of their folks was like, hey, everybody, you're too fat, you're too ugly, you're too this, you're too, and picking on the fat thing. Oh, don't worry, we've got the cure, right? We've got the cure. So that was in the 1940s. Let's move to 1950. Jean Meyer. So Jean Meyer. So this guy is the person to come up with the idea that physical activity will help you lose weight. He was a French-American scientist, and he established the popular notion that physical activity would help you lose weight with this really incredibly poor quality observational study he completed on a handful of children. So he went to a summer camp. He looked at a group of girls. Some of them were fat, some of them weren't fat. He noticed in that group of girls, one was a cheerleader, one was a ballet dancer, and on the whole, the smaller girls did more physical activity than the bigger girls. This is him just go into some camp and just having a look around, right? And from that, he was like, aha, I know why. I know the mechanisms. Clearly, the people who are bigger because they don't do physical activity. And there was nothing popped up into his head to say, Could anything else be going on here? Could it be that the fat kids are shamed when they do physical activity, and so they'd rather do other things? Could it be that having a bigger body came first and not wanting to engage in physical activity came second? Could it be that the physical activities that were on offer at the camp that weekend didn't tickle their fancy and they were more into rugby and archery and that was on next weekend? Could it be that they came from poorer families who couldn't afford to send them to ballet classes and buy them cheerleading outfits, and could they even fit into the cheerleading outfits because they only came in small sizes? Like a little bit of investigation here, Jean Mayer. But no, he was like, aha, eureka, I've got it. Weight loss is easy to achieve temporarily through reducing what you eat, right? Weight loss from moving your body, really, really hard to achieve. It's just not doable. Weight loss from physical exercise, even though exercise can be something that's really health promoting for some people, not for everyone. It can be helpful, but it's not helpful for people to lose weight. It's just not. There's no evidence. And I mean, Jean here was the first one to say it with his really shit study. No matter how much you exercise, the calorie burning effects are limited by your metabolism. And so Mayer was incredibly ambitious and was zealous in spreading his faulty science to the US. He became an advisor to 3 presidents, and his ideas were published in numerous newspaper columns. His influence was such that it became public policy, and so did the deep flaws in his logic. And to us now, it's like, well, of course, if you exercise, you'll lose weight. It seems so logical. But, these ideas are not backed by science. So in 1954, we have A.J. Kremen. A.J. Kremen was the first weight loss surgery doctor. And he was the first one to perform a gastric bypass. Kremen and his team connected a patient's upper and lower intestines. It caused numerous medical problems, such as uncontrollable diarrhea in patients, as well as other things. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, a weight loss surgery now is fucking horrendous. Never mind in 1954, the first weight loss patients. And why did A.J. Kremen, where did this come from, right? Where did this come from? Why was he doing this, right? And obviously, in 1954, this was happening because of diet culture, of fat phobia, and because clearly diets weren't working. We wouldn't have the need for weight loss surgery if diets worked. And so in 1954, people were resorting to, which was then a very, very, new and dangerous, with no understanding of long-term effects, surgery in order to become smaller, which leads me to believe, that's a difficult decision, right? And so it leads me to believe that they had done lots of things to try and lose weight before doing this, right? So then we had in 1959 Metrical, which was a brand of this milkshake, which was said to look like baby formula for weight control. And it was the first mass market diet product launched. So Metrical, and it came in like a can that you opened with a tin can opener. And I watched an advert from them, and the advert went, 1 out of 2 adults is overweight. 1 out of 2 adults is overweight. Where is that from? Oh, remember Mr. Dublin, Louis Dublin of MetLife, who classified 50% of the US population as too fat? And here we go, 1959, we've got adverts for it. 1 out of 2 adults is overweight. And because overweight not only detracts from appearance, It also impairs health and shortens life. You should lose weight. I mean, where is this information coming from? Impairs health and shortens life. It's coming from that insurance company. So you were to drink the product instead of meals. So it's the first meal replacement thing. And they use that Dublin's flawed statistics to persuade people to buy their product. They convinced more people that they had a problem through TV and magazine adverts so that they can sell them the solution, right? So Louis had said, we've got a problem. And advertisers were like, oh, yes, thank you, licking their lips. We've got the solution. So advertisers positioned it as something fun to drink, a way of life. And so they've got an advert where it's like, they're having a cocktail party. And you're there with your friends who are all thin, and you're thin as a star of the advert, and you're like laughing, drinking this fucking rank Metrical, because especially like the shakes in the early days were really bad tasting. And so they made it into the scene, this like really cool and social thing. And they made it, it was presented as a really aspirational way of life. And the Metrical ads were huge successes, and they ran for years. And soon Metrical had hundreds of imitators because consumers' failures at getting thin was a recipe for business success. And by the early 1970s, diet companies were turning over millions of dollars. And as the market became more competitive, it also became more extreme. So with the idea that weight loss came from also working out, we had the rise of, in the 1970s, people like Richard Simmons. And he was the first person to make serious money by talking about exercise and weight loss. And so the Richard Simmons show was seen in 200 markets by over 5 million people 5 days a week. He had a best-selling book saying never say diet, and his own gym, and ran weight loss cruises where people shouted farewell to fat. He claims to have helped humanity lose 3 million pounds of fat, with no evidence to support this claim. And he made his success by exploiting fat people, exploiting people who were vulnerable. And a lot of people are like, oh, Richard Simmons is so nice. He always wants to help people. And he could have, absolutely, he could have genuinely wanted to help people. But I mean, he had made his success over a method that doesn't work, which isn't science-based. And he was a raging fat phobe, and he used fat people in order to continue to be successful. So, I mean, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. All right, so in 1977, we had The Last Chance Diet by Robert Lynn, a revolutionary new approach to weight loss. Oh my goodness, in 1977 they cracked it. So the claim was people will lose up to 100 pounds by using it instead of food. And it was a high protein drink, so kind of like Metrical, but they're going balls to the walls now with making it as nothingness in it as possible. So it was high protein and lacking essential nutrients and vitamins. So it began to be linked to serious health problems and death, this freaking drink. So the inventor of the diet, Dr. Robert Lynn, denied any wrongdoing, and the FDA eventually banned it. The industry responded by adding vitamins to meal replacement drinks, and people just carried on buying them. The most popular of this tweaked version was Slim Fast. So Dr. Robert Lynn, he was like, here's a drink with protein in. I'm a doctor. I know what I'm talking about. So it was just protein, People died because they couldn't, humans can't survive just on this drink, right? There was no nutrients, and there's no vitamins, and it was seriously lacking nutrients. And the guy was just like, when the FDA banned it, he was like, la 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 la, fingers in ears, nothing wrong with it, I'm a doctor. Yeah, so Slim Fast, the natural way to lose weight, was invented in 1977. That's when the FDA banned this drink. So he actually started the drink a little bit earlier than 1977. And so it was invented in 1977 by New York businessman Daniel Abraham. And so his strategy was to sell Slim Fast cheaper and make it tastier than his medicinal tasting rivals. The Slim Fast plan was sold as a natural and healthy way to lose weight. And so it's the same thing, meal replacement shakes, and then they also created food products. And Daniel Abraham, at that time, I think individually, still is the most successful diet billionaire that has ever lived. He sold the company to Unilever in 2000 for $2.3 billion. He also created Dexatrim, which was a diet supplement, which increased the risk of hemorrhagic stroke alongside other nasty side effects. So he was in it for, getting the money out of the fatties. And when you hear him talking about, watching an interview with him, he, really has contempt for fat folks. Yeah, so he has made some money, a lot of money, 2.3 billion off the backs of fatties. Okay, so going back in time again to 1963. I thought I had these in time order. Apparently I didn't. The Atkins diet. So the Atkins as in a keto diet, so it's a ketogenic keto, that was invented like in the 1915s, 10, something around there. And actually it wasn't a diet for weight loss, it was a diet for children with epilepsy, right? And so for a long time it was just used as a diet for children with epilepsy, and it still is today because it's effective as something for children with epilepsy, right? And so in 1963, Robert Atkins came along, and he didn't like diets that meant drinking meal replacements or counting calories, and so he decided he could lose weight just by cutting out carbs and using this keto diet. And this was based on a false idea that certain food types were responsible for weight gain. So his book, A Diet Revolution, sold hundreds and thousands of copies a week. And he was the first international diet guru. And despite the criticisms over the next 40 years, he built an empire with a range of low-carb foods. So there's no evidence to show that the use of the Atkins diet or his products results in long-term weight loss or improved health, unless you are a child with epilepsy. Then you could just do any type of keto diet you don't need to do Atkins. So, there was a big hoo-ha about, Atkins died because he had a heart attack or something. I was looking into this, and actually he died. So this is what happened. This is what I've seen. There was an icy sidewalk in New York. He fell, slipped, hit his head. I think he went into a coma, then died. But then there was leaked medical records. His wife refused to let them do an autopsy, apparently. This is all apparently. Leaked autopsy records to say that he had problems with his heart. But then other people came and said, actually, it was just some type of minor thing. And I think he was in his 70s. So it was not that scandalous. But some people are like, aha, here's proof that the Atkins diet didn't work because the Atkins founder died of coronary heart disease. And he was so fat when he died. like they mentioned how many pounds he was. He wasn't so fat when he died. I think he was just like an average weight of a man, you know. But they were like, haha, this shows that this diet doesn't work. Well, I mean, he's one man, right? You can't say, oh, a diet doesn't work because he might have died from a heart condition. Who knows, right? But I mean, that's what really is this diet going to make people thin? Because that is what are people going on diets for? Is thin, increased health, improved health, or whatever. And there is no evidence, right? And he was going to diet eventually. He lived to 70 plus. I mean, which is, I think, slightly less than the average. But I mean, is this black and white thinking that I'm like, I don't like this black and white thinking of, haha, see, we don't know what else is going on in his life. And I mean, he fell and slipped. We might have fell because he had a heart attack. Who knows? We don't know, right? And even if he did, us fat positive people are not judging people in that way anyway. So that's the scandal. I don't know what to make of it. Either way, Atkins doesn't make you thin. And he got very rich and became an international diet guru on the back that it will make you thin. So Jean Nidetch, the founder of Weight Watchers. So she is this was in the 1960s, right? So Jean began giving talks to housewives who wanted to slim after she had lost weight herself. She then decided to franchise the business by having copycat Jeans all over the world, giving speeches to groups of people and charging for the privilege. In 1967, during the time of Twiggy thinness being in, Weight Watchers came to the UK. The head of the UK operations, Bernice Weston, she is a giant bellend, said, you can go and watch it. Episode 1. Quote, when it comes to eating, fat people are basically very stupid. Thanks, Bernice. You can suck my tits. So Weight Watchers own statistics and, quote, evidence of success has shown that their, quote, lifestyle change is not effective, and only a tiny percentage of people maintaining weight loss past 5 years. So Weight Watchers was transformed into a small domestic business into a global super brand under the financial direction of Richard Samba, who worked there for 25 years. And he said, okay, so this is the finance director of Weight Watchers for 25 years. He said, Weight Watchers is successful because those who fail have to come back and do it again. That's where your business comes from. So he was quite happily talking to the journalist, saying, yeah, I mean, that's our business, is repeat customers. Weight Watchers chief scientific officer said she was really mad that he said this. She was like, well, he doesn't know anything. He's not here anymore, so he can I don't like him. Basically, she was mad. But then she said, there's a reason that we've been here for 60 years. It's because people come back to us time and time again. Oh, really? Like, why are you bragging about that? Weight Watchers has a revenue of $1 billion a year. Today, Weight Watchers is based in the very building where Louis Dublin from MetLife Insurance Company paved the way for the diet industry all those years ago. Okay, so let's move to the 1990s. We've got an honorable mention here for not a person, but a pill. I guess I could try and find out who created it. It was probably a team of people. Anyway, fen-phen, so fenfluramine slimming pills. So methamphetamines, previous to this, methamphetamines were prescribed in the 50s and 60s to lose weight. And then they were banned. Because they realized that they were giving housewives meth. But then it paved the way for fenfluramine phentamine, which was called fen-phen, and then that was released for sale after meth was banned. And it was lauded as a dream drug and a miracle cure. It was an appetite suppressant. It was addictive, and it killed many people, and it has long-term effects for the people who took it. The manufacturers, Wyeth Pharmaceuticals, so we're going to hold a pharmaceutical company at whole responsible for this one. Wyeth Pharmaceuticals knew of the harm that their product, what the harm of their product, and withheld this evidence even when they were under investigation in order to cash in on the moral panic around the made up O-word epidemic. So fen-phen, by the way, it's spelled PHEN-FEN. And the thing is with these diet drugs, we did an episode on diet drugs. It's always the same story. There's this miracle drug that is gonna make people thin, and it's how does it work? Oh, it's basically speeding up your heart. LOL. And the FDA approves it because being fat is the worst thing ever, and it doesn't matter if fat people die because at least they'll be fat and dead. LOL. I'm being sarcastic there with that LOL. And, even in recent years of these, drugs that are coming out, it's the same shit. We don't have the evidence. They'll have a short-term study. People lost weight. Yeah, but then they died, So we got to, when we have these new drugs coming to market, looking at what they do and what long-term evidence that we have for it. Because it's probably not good. Okay, now my personal, I hate this guy. I feel like he is really a villain. Professor Philip James, British guy. 1995, he set up the International O-Word Task Force, IOTF. He looked at the recommended BMIs created by Louis Dublin in the 1940s. So it's 1995 by now. He looked at the recommended BMIs created by an insurance company and arbitrarily dropped the recommended BMI due to that faulty evidence. This was then adopted by the World Health Organization. Millions more people became classed as fat again overnight. The IOTF, the International Obesity Task Force, was funded. Who were they funded by? What do we think? Tell me your answer. Who were they funded by? Weight loss companies. Yes, you're right. Weight loss drug companies who gave a number of payments to Philip James, totaling £1 million or 1.2 million US dollars. And he's like, yeah, who cares that they're the ones who funded this research? Even if it's false, at least we're going to get people to be less fat. That's his attitude. Like, it doesn't matter if it's wrong, if it's arbitrary, because if we tell more people that they're fat, then less people will be fat. Like, what? More people can be treated for the disease of fatness. Okay, 2006, John Franco de Capello invented the KE diet. KE diet, which is keto. But it was with a twist, because we need to get more extreme, because, you know, it doesn't work. We need new branding. This is what we do. We need new branding. We need a new twist. Okay, and so this diet, the KE diet, also known as the feeding tube diet. A doctor will put a feeding tube into the patient and is fed a proprietary mixture, which is 270 calories a day through the feeding tube for a specific number of days. They then come back to the office, have the feeding tube out, and then presumably go away with a temporarily smaller body, probably disordered eating, and then will then weigh more than when they started. Absolutely fucking wild. And so it was the mixture was keto based, right? So the you know, protein, 270 calories a day. Can you imagine? Okay, so 2007 we have Kevin Trudeau, a marketing man with no medical training, has a diet book called The Weight Loss Cure They Don't Want You to Know About. Reported $5 million in sales, and is based on a discredited 1960s diet where you eat a tiny amount of calories a day and ingest hormones that can be extracted from the urine of pregnant women. I love the fact that this one's been discredited, but all the rest of the fucking every other diet hasn't been discredited yet. So that was a New York Times #1 bestseller, The Weight Loss Cure They Don't Want You to Know. Yeah. So in 2008, Saiju Jong and Artem Petakov created Noom. I was surprised that Noom's actually that old, because Noom feels like it's about 5 years old, right? And you're thinking, who are these creators? Are they nutritionists? Are they therapists? Because Noom is all about, you know, psychology. No, they are two computer scientists. And they trick people into thinking they are getting cognitive behavioral therapy. Their website says Noom is grounded in science. It's at the heart of everything we do. Is it Noom? Is it? Because they have so I went into they have a research bank. Oh, love it, Noom. Gonna look at all these studies. And they've got the links to the studies, and then they tells you what the study says in a sentence. They're laughable. They really are laughable. I scroll all the way down to the one study that says, from the 40 plus studies that they've got, because they're like, we love science, and this is how these diet companies are tricky motherfuckers. Because if you said, okay, so we're backed by science, okay, I believe you, but actually I want to do a little more digging. We use cognitive behavioral therapy. We use psychology. Oh, that sounds fancy. Must be true. But if you still don't believe us, check out our 40 plus scientific studies. You've got 40 plus scientific studies. They must be great. All right, I believe you now. But even if you still don't, let's look at the studies. And that's what I did. So I had a look at the studies. So one of them has got mention of amount of people who have like 30-something thousand people. I was like, God, amazing, love it. Lots of people. That's good, right? When we had that that episode I did a few weeks ago on how to decipher studies, right? And so one of the things that the studies do is they'll say, we looked at 3 people. Turns out blah blah blah, and so it's like, really, 3 people, or 10 people, but this had 30 plus thousand people. Great, off to a great start. they said, the summary of this study is 77.9% reported a decrease in body weight while they were using the app. Oh, okay. That doesn't sound that good. If someone is using the app, shouldn't it be 100% of people losing weight? But okay, well, let's go with 7. Let's round it up to 80%. 80%. Okay, well, 80%. All right. How much weight did they lose? Well, looking at it, most lost less than 5% of their weight. Okay, so 5%. If we're looking at a 200-pound person, that means that person lost 10 pounds. And what's the other thing that we said about studies, specifically weight loss studies? Do you remember about the timing? With all diets, weight loss is very easy to achieve normally, depending on how many diets you've done. The more diets you've done, it's harder. But you will lose weight initially, and then 3 to 5 years, that's when the weight comes back on and more. They looked at users over 18 months. Of course. So they're fantabulous data to show that 80% of people lost around 5% of their body weight in 18 months. Doesn't sound that amazing, does it? And that's what, that's like the top line of reading the study. If we go in deeper, we'll get more information, but I was like, shit, it's not going to get any better than that, is it? I mean, this is what they're bragging about, and so I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that it is 77.9% of people who lost weight, and give them the benefit of the doubt that that's a good thing, and give them, but it's a tiny amount of weight, and it's people who are self-reporting. All right, so I love this post by Reagan Chastain. I'm going to give you a quote from it. About Noom. Their commercials are chock full of diet advice that is old as the hills and has no research to back it as actually creating sustained weight loss. Brackets, eat grapes instead of raisins, drink wine instead of beer, drink a glass of water if you're hungry, blah, blah, blah. A lot of the program seems to be based on the old eat watery, fibery, bulky food so you'll feel fuller advice that doesn't work because your body is a sophisticated piece of machinery and not a lawnmower. In 1987 called and wants its shitty diet advice back. Moreover, how can they claim to be brand new while also claiming that they help you keep the weight off for life? That claim would have had to be backed by some serious long-term research in order to be credible. I asked them for research. I asked in an email, through their website contact, and on social media, including one memorable thread that's had 758 comments, to which they replied directly to 757. Guess whose comment did not receive a response? Reagan's comment. Yeah, so it's hilarious. They're like, we're a brand new diet, lifelong weight loss. Well, how do you know that you're offering lifelong weight loss when you haven't been around for life, for people's lives? The reason why Noom is so big is because they got a shit ton of investor backing. They were anticipated to go to IPO, initial public offering, and that would value Noom in excess of $6 billion. So Noom, right, these companies, right, what they are, a lot of these companies, what they are is they're just sophisticated marketing companies, right? Because they have this product which is shit, big pile of shit, and they do some very good wizardry to trick us. People are very passionate about Noom. Whenever people mention Noom online, there's going to be people who will say, no, they're different. They talk about psychology. But No, they don't. They give you a very, very low calorie diet, no matter what your goals are. If you say you want to be healthy, if you say you want to lose weight, they'll give you the same fucking thing. And they will give you, they do the coding that, you know, red foods, green foods, yellow foods, right? The same shit that Weight Watchers was doing, right? Points. And what's the other one in the UK? There's a big one, Slimming World in the UK. And they've been around, what, since the 60s? It's the same fucking advice that's been going around for you for forever. This food is bad, and if you eat it, you're going to get fat, so don't eat it. You've lost weight. Hurrah! Oh, don't talk to us in a year or two, because we don't want to know when you're fat again. But they've got millions, and they have had so much funding. That's why every single fucking podcast has a Noom advert. It's because of the gargantuan amount of funding that they have. Because they are smart marketers. Because they've said, okay, there's a gap in the market for a good app.